So first, a quick audience survey. How many people are developing iOS applications right now? Okay, how many people came to this session looking for an iOS 101 talk? Might not be the best audience. It does require that some familiarity with iOS and the tools that we're using. We're not going to cover the basic building blocks of building iOS applications. So that's just a heads up. If you do want to go see the Async Scala talk, that's where I'd be. But anyway, any particular reason? Fantastic, so I can't use keys. Okay, so my name is Kevin Griffin. I'm a consultant with Chariot Solutions. I've been with them for about 4 years now. I've been fortunate enough to do mobile development for most of that. And you can find me on the Twitters at kgriffin, and you can email me at kev@chariot-solutions. So the idea behind Jumpstart Your Next iOS project was kind of looking back at some of the projects that I've been involved in and sort of how we got started and the tools that we were using. One of the things that I noticed looking back is the evolution of iOS over the last sort of 6 years has been tremendous, and the user libraries have come along even further and even quicker than that. So we kind of wanted to take a look and see how can we use some of these tools to help get projects started a little bit quicker. And for me, a lot of that focus is on testing, be it unit or functional, and we'll go through sort of a couple of frameworks to help out with both of those as we go through. So things that I like to have, these are purely things that I've had in more or less every software project that I've done in dependency management, whether it's Maven or GEMS, sort of any form of testing, whether it's been Unit or Selenium or Cucumber. Automated distribution is one that we've certainly I've not done a lot of, but we do it a lot in certainly in iOS development, and we use tools to push out those tests, the applications out to our test devices, test suites, or whether stakeholders. And certainly as consultant, that's a huge piece for us. And then tooling is the last one. Tools have come a long way. Xcode itself has come a long way from Xcode 3 to Xcode 4. There's been some third-party tools around there too, and so we're going to take a brief tour of my favorite one of those, which does involve ponies, which is why there's a pony in the bottom corner. So my ideal setup is really my ideal setup. It's something that I've come to find that it's my way of working within Xcode, and as much as we dislike Xcode, most iOS developers tend to, it's trying to integrate a little bit better into the day-to-day workflow within Xcode to make sure that I'm being as productive as I can be. So unit tests that run on build seems like a really simple one, but when you create an Xcode project out of the box, it doesn't actually do this. It'll create you a failing test, but your build will still pass. And that irks me greatly. And it's been a curve that I've struggled to get over since I started doing iOS development. So we're going to take a look at that and sort of see why we want to be doing that. Functional tests they really do depend sort of on your application or the type of application you're building. But we find that there are times as we're going through the application that we want to verify workflows. We've had functional tests in Java, whether it's Selenium or Python and Selenium or Cucumber or what have you. And ideally, we'd have those running as part of our build as well, at least runnable from our environment, so that we can basically keep pace keep tests up to pace with our code. Automated distribution. We'll look at a couple of frameworks that help us do that. It's sort of come along a lot quicker in the last few years, but we're just going to take a look at two of those. So dependency management. So we never really had dependency management at the start of certainly when I started doing iOS development, we kind of struggled with building static libraries and then distributing those static libraries and then getting the build settings right. And then what did you do when you wanted to uprev one? You either clone a module in Git, or it was never particularly clean. It was actually Steve, one of my colleagues, who put me onto Cocoa Pods, and I think that's quickly become the de facto standard for our dependency management within iOS projects at Chariot. There is another one out there. I think it's called Vendor Kit or Vendor Forge. I think it renamed itself to Vendor Kit recently. I've never used it. Has anyone used Vendor Kit for dependency management in iOS? Great. Has anyone used Cocoa Pods for dependency management in iOS? So 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's good because I have an extra slide which I was going to show anyway, which is just a real simple, take a look at this middle portion there is a very basic pod file. Pod is just a gem that you install, gem install Cocoa pods, and you can run pod searches to look for specific libraries or whatever you're looking for. So then this small portion here, this is just a pod file. It's got a platform. It can be iOS or Mac, and that version is specific for iOS. And it's just got a list of dependencies that I would like, AF networking and a version number. And they can become a little bit more complicated, and I will actually take a look at, when we move on into the testing, actually having specific sections of your pod file specific for testing. And then if you want to go ahead and pull down your dependencies, you can just run pod install. What that will do for you is it'll create an Xcode workspace, give you 2 projects. One is your development project. One is a pods project, and the pods project is self-contained and self-managed, and it keeps out of the way of your development project. So, the thing I'd like to have, dependency management, it's not done. We put a little check mark. We're going to see it a lot more as we go through. So, the next point that I kind of like to have is the idea of test on build, and test when I press Command B, not when I press Command U, because I think it's a bit of a hack, and I forget to do it. So one of the things that I want to do is kind of introduce logic tests for that run on Command build. Apple makes a distinction. When I say unit test, I mean tests around discrete pieces of business logic. Apple has another abstraction on that where they say logic tests and application tests. Application tests require your full UI kit stack to be there, and they run either on the device or on the simulator. And logic tests don't have no UI component, and they purely run in a simulator, or basically, on your Mac when you're running it. Right. So we're going to try and do a live coding demo, and hopefully it'll work. So I have created a brand new Xcode project here. It's called rain check, and I've checked the box. I don't know if you can see at the back, but there's a box that says include unit tests, which is great. So I go ahead and I say create, and if you go into here and you look in your rain check test target, wow, that's not going to help. It sees that it's actually created a failing test for us, yet you can still build quite happily even though you've essentially broken your application because your tests are failing. Fantastic. So I prefer Kiwi to the regular send testing framework here. So I'm going to delete those. I'm going to bring in our first dependency, which is our test dependency on Kiwi. So I just create a pod file. Xcode, awesome. So here's my empty pod file, and I can just use code snippets, fantastic. We saw the presenter using them at WWDC. They're really great way to put code in quickly. So we have a pod file. We specify the target, and here we go and just drop this in. So what we're saying for this particular one is that for the test target that the project created. So if you go back here, you'll see you've already got a unit test target. We're saying for that one only, include the Kiwi dependency because we don't really need to ship Kiwi with our production build. And all exclusive true is saying is don't include any of the other dependencies that I may list above this test target because we shouldn't be needing them inside of our tests anyway. So if I go ahead, I can create an empty test file, which I just called canary spec. I saw someone else present and run a similar type of test, and I have no idea who it was, so I can't attribute it. But all it is just a test that says, I've got everything set up and I've included everything correctly. So I've done all that, and I introduced a pod file, and I introduced a test target, and I've introduced a test that's still going to fail because we haven't actually run pod install to get our dependency. So if we, and it's going to be really nice to us, and we're going to do pod install. So this is going out. It's going out. It's going to check it out GitHub, put it into its own workspace, and put it into its own project, and give us a workspace to open. those are lovely warnings. It's telling us that it's overriding build settings that we had defined for when we created the project, but we don't really need those right now. So if I go back, actually, let me go back to the command line. Rain check, Xcode workspace, fingers crossed. Okay, so we ran our pod install and it's given us two projects, pods and rain check. And it's got our dependency inside of pod. If we drill down into pods, you can see that Kiwi is there. So now, hopefully, well, we're still going to run and it'll succeed, even though for those astute of you have noticed that 16 and 26 do not actually equal 43. So you need to wrangle Xcode into actually running your tests. So there's a test thing here that says test after build, and you want yes, oh, no, you don't. You want to do this on your rain check test target, otherwise bad things will happen. So we're going to here, that makes more sense. So test after build, you need to change to yes. And this test host setting is actually in reference to running application tests, not running Apple's logic tests. So we can safely remove that, and we're actually going to solve the application style test or functional test with a different tool. So I don't really need that. And the last thing is to click this entirely obvious button up here, go into your build target, into the build, and then click run. So, and hopefully, after all that, yay, finally, my build fails because I have broken unit tests. And that's it. I could end my presentation at that point because that's the only piece that I wanted to get over, was that you can actually make Xcode do the right thing and work for you. But we're going to carry on. So we can close you and go back to the slides. Evil thing. Okay, so we had to do a couple of things in order to get the test dependency into our project. One is we created a pod file, and we added in an exclusive target for Kiwi, so we only include it in our debug builds, not in our production releases. And then we have to wrangle some Xcode build settings, set test after build to yes, remove the test host, and then the really long setting to get to run the project. Functional test. So like I said, Apple makes the distinction between unit tests of logic and application. And these things have been here from kind of day one. I mean, Apple shipped with Send Testing Kit. It's not quite as nice as the Kiwi style, which is a BDD RSpec style test framework. iOS shipped with UI automation as well, and you can use UI automation. It's kind of a record and replay method of testing. For me and for a lot of our developers, the idea of being able to write sort of functional tests inside of our product, inside of the app, and having them written in Objective-C is nice and really powerful. So the KIF framework, Keep It Functional, came to us from the guys at Square, and it's the nice feature for us is that all your tests are written in Objective-C, which gives you access to, if you need to stub or mock anything inside of your test and make your UI, or put it into situations where you can determine that your UI is behaving in the right way. Ooh, Xcode time again. So we're going to open up Xcode. We had a TV show in England called Blue Peter, where they always had like this random collection of things, and they were like, here's one I made earlier, and it was great and fantastic, but no one could understand how they actually got there. So hopefully we can work through. What I've created is just an empty project with a dependency for KIF inside of here, and we have a new test target called raincheck functional test, which only includes the KIF. We don't have the exclusive flag set on this one because whatever dependencies we end up specifying for our project, we'll probably want those when we're actually testing the application for real. So when getting started with KIF, there's a couple of things. Pod install does 90% of the work for you. There are a couple of things you have to do. You have to duplicate your original build target. So we have a new one called raincheck functional tests, which is done purely just by hitting Command D. And then we have to get Kiwi into a state where it knows what to do. So It requires a couple of things.